I'm Larry Hodell, a local Southern California realtor, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I have these every week to try and keep you up to date on really important topics in the real estate industry. The topic today is, what are closing costs in California? It's sort of an ambiguous thing that people hear all the time, and they'd like to have a better idea probably of where their money's going for closing costs. Probably the number one thing is real estate commissions. When you hire a listing agent to sell your house, and these closing costs are primarily for sellers because they have the brunt of the closing costs compared to buyers. So if you want information from a buyer's perspective, give me a call, let me know, and I'll be sure and make some up for a future video. So real estate commissions are probably the number one item from a cost standpoint, and it's the listing agent, his broker's commissions, and as well the buyer's agent, whoever that happens to be, brokerage commissions added to that as well. The second thing are escrow charges and fees. Escrow charges a fee for handling the documents, making sure all the monies go to the right places, and they sort of ride herd on the entire process and interface with the buyer, the seller, title, things of that type. They also hold the earnest money deposit from the buyer and make sure that's properly taken care of and distributed at the right time. The next item would be termite repairs, for example. Termite corporations typically will do the repairs on a property and hold off on payment until escrow is closed. Of course, if for some strange reason after the repairs are done, escrow does not close, then they have to be paid, usually by the seller who authorizes the repairs. As well, any agreement between the buyer and seller where the seller would agree to pay part of the buyer's closing costs, those funds would be part of the closing costs paid by escrow at the close as well. Another item, in California, typically the seller pays for a one-year home warranty for the buyer. A few $100s, not really expensive, but it's an item that has to be included. HOA documents, in case it is a condominium, for example. The seller in California typically pays for those documents, which would include the HOA board meeting minutes, financial statements, and I've seen it be 100 to 200 pages thick, so it's a pretty big stack of documents for the seller to review, and it's usually part of his buyer contingency in the purchase agreement. Natural hazard report is another item that's typically in California paid for by the seller. It comes out of the escrow as part of the closing costs, and this is a report that assures the buyer that he is not, or perhaps is, in a flood zone, fire zone, not next to a munitions plant, things of that type. Also, transaction coordinator fees, which also are paid out of the closing costs, is a fee to make sure that all the documents are signed properly, that we get all the correct documents as required. Transaction coordinator fees are in California paid by the seller, and if the buyer wants to have his transaction coordinator, then he has his own fees as well. Title fees and charges are part of closing costs. The title company wants to make sure that the seller is who he says he is, and they want to check the chain of title to make sure that when escrow does close, they can have a free and clear title to transfer over to the new buyer. Government recording and transfer charges are typically paid by the seller in California, and that would include city and county transfer fees for the real estate transaction. Also, prorated property taxes are handled as closing charges, or sometimes, depending on when you close, the seller may get money back if he has paid past or before a certain time. Again, all these charges are, if I've mentioned any, are estimates, and probably the main thing, however, is that the unpaid mortgage balance, in order for the seller to release the property, has to be paid out of the proceeds of the escrow transaction as well. So any good real estate agent should be able to, typically even before you sign a purchase agreement, give you what we call a estimated seller's net sheet. And this is a sheet which lists all the charges and all the debits and credits that would occur at the proposed buyer's offer price if you closed escrow, and at the bottom, of course, how much the seller would walk away with funds in his pocket. Again, it's an estimate, but usually they come up fairly close to what the actual amount is. So I hope that covers what are closing costs in California, to give you a rough idea of what to expect. If you'd be so kind as to hit the like button here and the subscribe button over here, I'll make sure that you get hooked up to receive my weekly YouTube videos. I try and keep them brief and very succinct and to the point, so I only give you topics that you can really use and want to hear about. Thanks much, and have a great week.